So we're going to take a look at gene mutation. Now remember, you got all this DNA in your cells, right? Lots and lots of DNA in your cells. Half of the DNA came from your mom and half came from your father, right? And that's why you show attributes of both your mom and your dad. Some of them are chosen to be expressed, others are hidden, and that's why you don't show all of the characteristics of your mother and not all the characteristics of your father, right? So you have many, many genes. And those are the things that your body interprets. Usually they produce something called proteins, and those proteins lead to characteristics. They can be really obvious characteristics like hair color, eye color, skin tone, height. It can be less obvious things like intelligence, too, right? And illnesses that you might be predisposed to that you don't know. They're underlying. They're not visible to the naked eye, but they're all in there. Alrighty? And we did talk about the fact that not everything has, even if you have the gene, it doesn't have to be turned on. And the analogy is if you're 6'4", right, Ben? I don't know how tall you are, but your dad could be 5'1" and your mother could be 5'3", and you might say, what happened there? Well, you might have the genes from your mom and dad. It just happens that they were raised in a condition that didn't allow it to be expressed to its full, right? And you'll find that quite often with first-generation Canadians or first-generation Americans that move from first world countries. And then all of a sudden their kids are taller, 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 taller. And then they reach a ceiling, right? After a couple generations of being in Canada or the United States or Europe, everyone's kind of like within a range of their maximum height, right? The whole family doesn't seem to be too much taller or too much shorter, kind of flattens out, okay? So that's the nurture part. Now these genes are not, they don't stay forever the same way. We have things called mutagens. Mutagens can be chemicals, right? Or they can be energy. So we can eat things, we can inhale things, and those chemicals, like those that we find in smoke when you're a smoker, can change your DNA. Other things like radiation from the sun, those are energy. They can come in and change your DNA. Now, if it changes the DNA in a gene, that gene could be expressed, right, differently as a protein. That protein could be slightly different. Now, remember, if that protein is slightly different, is it good, bad, or what? And most of us go bad, 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 right? We've seen these in movies. Swamp Thing, bad, right? And all the evil aliens, bad, right? But you got to remember, we evolved from essentially slime from a pond into this thing here, this multicellular organism that has both attributes of being handsome and smart. Right there. So we depend on mutations to evolve. We do. So they can be good too. They can be bad, and then they can also be neutral. You remember that from grade 10 science? We say, oh, look, this tiger lost its stripes. Is that bad? Well, it lives in a zoo, so it's neutral, right? So it also depends on the environment as well. So those mutations, like I said, are changes in the sequence of within a gene in the DNA, and they can cause by their mutagens. Mutagens can be chemicals, or they can be energy. They can even be viruses. Viruses can actually mutate DNA as well. May lead to malfunctioning proteins in the cell. Usually not inheritable. The only way we can have an inheritable mutation is, does anyone know when that mutation has to happen? That mutation has to happen to the sperm or the egg. Okay? Because if it happens to like your skin cell, does your skin cell make sperm or eggs? No. So if you get too much sun, right, and you get a little mole, and the mole turns all funny bordered and hairy, and then it's like, you're like, wow, this thing is not nice, right? And you get a dermatologist to look at it and go, well, that's skin cancer. You won't pass that on, right? Because your skin cell doesn't make sperm and eggs, and that doesn't get inherited. So that's why when you go see the dentist, they put that giant apron over you, right? To protect you from we call them your somatic cells, your regular cells from mutating and going bad and turning into cancer or whatever, but also to protect your baby-making parts. Because if you're Now, most of you are probably thinking more about school and sports and stuff like in video games rather than having children. But you could, because you're reproductive age. So they still protect you. They cover you up and say, right, just in case, we don't want your baby with, 14 heads and 3 fingers on each hand. So they'll protect you with that apron. Okay. So usually not inheritable. But cancers, right? Cancers are, you might say, but cancers are inheritable. Yes, some cancers are inheritable. But also the predisposition to a cancer can be inheritable. But the trigger might be external and it might never ever turn it on, right? So you might say, my grandfather had lung cancer and my mom had lung cancer. I'm going to get lung cancer. Well, they're both smokers, right? So yeah, you might be susceptible to cancers, but you don't get exposed to those little triggers and it'll be fine, right? Most likely. So let's take a look at this video. Oh, I wonder if this video is going to work on the first try. I got to select it. I got to let grant access.
If a change occurs to the nucleotide sequence, it is like having the letters of a word change. An alteration in a gene is called a mutation. How do all these changes occur? There are actually a number of different things that can cause mutations. Examples include chemicals that can be swallowed or inhaled, such as those found in chewing tobacco and cigarette smoke, and radiation from the sun or artificial sources like a tanning bed. Sometimes mutations occur without any known external cause. They just happen.
There you go. That's from Morgan Freeman. Didn't it sound like Morgan Freeman a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounded like one of those old-fashioned, from like the black and white. Like the,
Yeah. I was going to flash the lights on really quickly, so it was like 35 mil.
Flicker.
Yeah.
Get the film sound.
I like your mask. It looks exactly like you underneath. I know.
P&E mask.
Oh, is that the P&E mask? Oh, right on.
Wasn't quite the same, but it was all right.
Yeah. You went a couple times, I heard, hey?
We just went with the West.
Oh, okay. Because I heard people were screaming all the time, and they said, that must be Mr. Eagleson. See ya. Okay, let's take a look at some of the scary, well, they're not, but here are a group of the top 5 most shocking human genetic mutations. So you got the claw hands. Dactyl means fingers or digits. So he's got this infection that's caused his cells to produce this hard layer. So you guys might know this, right? HPV. All the girls probably have been vaccinated for it, and then the boys some boys get vaccinated for it now too. But it's got all this really tough tissue, and he's had it removed, and it came back, and. So their legs are fused, they don't separate. There's been a couple movies about this disorder where you're accelerated aging. It's called progeria. And this is where the joints all start to fuse together, and eventually your back and your spine just turns into one solid bone mass. It's a long name. Fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva. Progressiva. Here we go. That's a weird disorder too. That one there, where you have bones turning into swords. There you go. So there's top 5 from YouTube. I don't know. I don't think it's a scientific research. It's just some random dude that found some videos. Anyways, there are obviously 3 results of mutation. Okay, they can be negative mutations where the organism is harmed. So like a black coat on a polar bear. Cancer is another good example of a negative mutation. Positive mutations are ones that makes an organism more successful in nature. So antibiotic-resistant bacteria. To us, that's bad, but for the bacteria, it's great, right? Like you can throw all the bacteria or antibiotics that we know at it, and it still survives. Coronavirus, this COVID-19, is another good example, right? Like we've had other ones, other viruses, other coronaviruses, but this one is. We've never seen this type before, and that was a mutation that made it super duper, resilient to all the things that we know when fighting viruses, because we've never seen it before. And then you got neutral mutation, where there's a change that happens, but there's no negative or positive end result. It's just like, oh, I'll just keep trucking along, right? It's all good. Now let's take a look at the causes of mutation. There could be some causes of mutation. One could just be your machinery, right? Your DNA polymerase just making a mistake. And I told you this last day. You have trillions and trillions of base pairs in each of your cells. And every time your cell needs to divide 1 to 2, right, it needs to copy it through a process of called replication, DNA replication, and then mitosis. So you started off as a single cell, right? From your mom and dad's firm handshake. And then as this fertilized egg was traveling down the fallopian tubes to your mom's uterus, it was dividing. And by the time it reaches your mom's, this is asexual, so you can't see it there, but by the time it reaches your mom's uterus, it was thousands of cells big, right? So it had to divide a whole bunch of times. And it had to copy word for word, letter for letter, the DNA over and over and over again. Now think of this. If you had to write a paper that was just even, 10,000 words long, what's the likelihood you writing it by hand or even typing it, because typing sometimes is challenging, without spell check on, how many mistakes would you make? Right? You'd make 1, 2. Some people in this class would spell their names wrong, right? They would have lots of problems. Well, this is so powerful, DNA polymerase, and its spell checking technology. It only makes 1 mistake in 100 million base pairs. So for 100 million characters it's typing out, making more DNA, it makes 1 mistake. Okay, and hopefully that mistake is in the junk part of the DNA, or it's in a part of a gene that doesn't affect the gene overall, and the protein works just as well. Or it makes it better. Or it's, like I said, neutral. So here we go.